Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? Just adjusting my music slightly to make sure that's all working. How is your Monday going? Assuming it is indeed Monday for you. How is my visual? I've adjusted my setup slightly, so I've actually got my ring light working properly now. So that is now on, hence light. But it does look like that my camera looks slightly out of focus, which is weird. Who knows? Maybe I'm imagining things. That is entirely possible. Let's turn that down ever so slightly. Or at least from my perspective, turning it down so slightly. I'll leave it on for you. Or it wants to just mess around and not. Has my music now just stopped? That's... technology, technology, technology. There we go. Music's working in the background. I will nail this eventually. It like works until I start, and then it starts being silly. Oh dear. It is going to be one of those days. It's Monday, of course it's one of those days. It is what it is in that sense. So, what is going on today? Well, let's start with the no, we'll do plugs at the end because that makes more sense, doesn't it, Dave? Yeah, you should really plan this a bit better. I've scribbled down stuff and then I didn't actually think about the order I wanted to talk about stuff in. So, what's going on for me? Well, not a terribly eventful weekend. We were all a little bit under the weather. So myself, my wife, and our 3-year-old all have a cold of some sort. So all of us are just a little bit off our game and didn't get the best sleep in the world. Got out on Sunday to a local country park, which was nice, called Wat Tyler Country Park, which I posted some photos of on Blue Sky and Twitter, maybe just Blue Sky. There is some slightly unnerving carved trees there. So in most of the area of this park, they've got a lot of cut down trees that they then sculpted into like bird houses and mushrooms and stuff like that. It looks really, really cool. And then you walk a little bit away from the kind of children's park there, and they've got like these 6 ominous looking figures standing there, like one carrying a sword, one wrapped in rope, one, head in hands, almost looks like they're covered in blood. Someone else carrying a rope. It looks very sinister. I did a bit of Googling later, and it does appear that this is... Well, it doesn't actually say it, but given the fact that this is Wat Tyler Country Park, I Googled Wat Tyler, who I knew the name of, but didn't know anything about it. He led the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 and was executed for it. So my assumption would be that this is a representation of him being led out to his execution. Hence, someone at the front carrying a sword, which is interesting. A sword, not an axe. You would have thought being executed in like the 1300s, it would be an axe and not a sword. Maybe it's easier to... Well, maybe just the shape of it. Maybe it makes it easier to make it a sword. But yes, so that was slightly weird. But it was a nice day out. And I think we all needed the fresh air. Because as I said, we were all feeling a little under the weather. I'm generally feeling a bit better today. Nobles got executed by swords. Yes, I think I have heard that before. I wonder why. Yeah. Let's find out on Wat Tyler's nobility. If it was a leader of the 1381 Peasants' Revolt. He led a group of rebels from Canterbury to London to oppose the institution of a poll tax. I don't know what his background was. Little is known about his early life. Don't know. I would guess, given the fact it's leading a Peasants' Revolt, probably not nobility. But who knows? I don't know. But interesting. Yeah. And slightly, like I said, slightly unnerving statues. And on that note, how are we doing, Bobicus? Are we having a good day? Or good evening? You're America-based, aren't you? So you're very early in the morning, I believe. Like 5 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning or something. So, what else is going on? I'm just going to check something in the background, which is sensible while I do this. So, and don't do a preview. There we go. That's better. So, what's going on right now? So, what I've been doing over the weekend and a little bit on Friday is I've been brainstorming a little bit about some stuff about upcoming tabletop RPG stuff. Obviously, I want to carry on with a lot of Little Bit Fierce stuff I'm doing. I will bite the bullet and actually finish off Blunderlings. I have to be away for a couple of days with work this week, which is not ideal timing. It's kind of frustrating. I won't go into the details because obviously I'm not going to discuss my day job on here, but I have to be away for work for 2 nights. So I'm thinking during travel and evenings I might get a bit of writing done. So I'm hoping to nail down the end of Blunderlings, which would be good. And actually I have 2 smaller projects as well that I've been rattling in my head for a little while, one longer than the other, that I want to sit down and write. So one of them is kind of silly. No, what's kind of about it? It's definitely sillier. It's definitely sillier. And one of them I think is potentially to be quite interesting, and it's actually branching out from an area that I normally tend to write in terms of making anything. So let's start with the silly one. So the silly one, it's kind of inspired, and it is done lovingly. It's kind of inspired by Caltrop Core. I don't know if for those listening whether you're aware of Caltrop Core. Caltrop Core is designed by Titanomachy RPG, and they've made a really good system reference document for making I don't want to say simple RPGs because that feels kind of demeaning of it, but in theory, the basis of the rule set is very, very straightforward. But then it provides a great framework for you to then build your own, potentially more complicated RPG based on it. And generally, the name suggests Caltrops, so it's D4s, and it's based on kind of a quite straightforward idea of kind of success and failure. And it can be picked up. Just Google Caltrop Core, and you'll find it. I think it is recommended donation of £1, but in theory is free. If you want to have a look, or finances are tight, that's totally understandable. But it provides a great basis for making games, making your own RPG, rather than having to go for something way more complicated, as a lot of larger systems are. So a while back, I joked on, I think it was Twitter, about kind of like what's the simplest rule set you could do? What's the simplest rule set you could have for an RPG that would still be fun? And kind of based on Caltrop Core, I came up with the idea of Calvin Core, which is a loving reference and parody, inspired by Calvin and Hobbes. For those who've never read Calvin and Hobbes, one, you are missing out. Calvin and Hobbes is a fantastic comic strip that was written by and illustrated by Bill Watterson. I want to say in the late 80s, early 90s. I read them as a kid, because my parents had copies of them and I have copies now. They are wonderfully inspiring. But one of the things that I think a lot of people remember from Calvin and Hobbes is Calvin and Hobbes play a game called Calvin Ball, which essentially is some sort of outdoor sport that involves a ball. I believe it's called the Calvin Ball, but the point is the rules are constantly changing and you never play it the same way again. And I've heard Flux gets referred to sometimes. It's like Calvin Ball. I think even in the tabletop episode, someone refers to Flux as being like Calvin Ball. So I lovingly come up with the idea of Calvin Core, which the idea of it is that essentially the rule set starts as you play whatever RPG you're going to be playing, or certainly whatever setting, whatever story you want to be playing. Anytime you're in a situation where you need to roll for something because it is not a clear immediate success or immediate failure, you have to roll for it, and by default you roll a d6, and if you get a 5 or more you succeed, and if you get a 4 or less you fail. But every time you pass a roll, the storyteller, or if you don't have a storyteller, another player gets to create a brand new rule and writes it on a card and puts it in the middle. If you fail the roll, you get to come up with a new rule, which you then add into the rule set. And there will be a note about kind of suggestions on what makes good and bad rules. I don't want to be too prescriptive on this one, but largely speaking, rules should be fun. And anything that is not fun does not make a good rule. Like, I don't even want to think of examples, but, fun rules would be things like, exploding dice. Or if you want to go really silly, it would be like, you get, rolls automatically succeed if you are, doing a handstand at the time. But cancel that. It's two people doing handstands. Or, these would be silly sort of variations to have on rules. Less fun rules would be any that, are not fun. I really don't want to dwell on that too much, but anything that is insulting, demeaning, impinges on other people's fun or other people's consent would not be a good rule. So you would not be putting rules in that do anything of that type. So the point is, it's a very, very simple rule set, and I'll turn it into a one-page document. It will be available for free, or if you want to donate, you can donate. But I think would be good fun to play on a stream, especially with like-minded silly people. And absolutely, I will put some licensing in there. If you do want to base your own game or rule set or something based on Calvin Core, you absolutely can. But it's been an idea been better over a while. It's like, I should just write this. I should just put it out and get it available. And before anyone asks, I will. Calvin is going to be a backronym, which, to be honest, is the thing I've spent the most time trying to come up with. Is what does Calvin stand for? So, Calvin Core is the continuously alterating law variation and innovative nonsense core system. So, Calvin Core, continuously altering law variation and innovative nonsense. I did consider making it the Hobbes system instead, which would have been highly original, boundless bullshit evolution system, but I wanted to avoid swearing if I could. But yes, I've had this note, and as is so often the case with my creative ideas, I have a note on my phone for ages. It's like, what would be a good acronym or backronym in this case to try and make this work for the name of it. So that's going to be Calvin Core. I will probably put something together for that in the next couple of weeks. I don't think it'll require much in the way of play testing because it's a fundamentally simple idea. I will run it past some people though to see if there's anything I want to make nicer in terms of language or presentation or anything like that, but I don't think it'll require significant play testing of any such because it is relatively straightforward. So we'll give a drink first. Fanta today. I've had too much coffee this morning, so I went to my normal Pepsi Max for lunch today, just because I know that if I have too much caffeine, it is not good for me. Quite a few years ago now, I want to say it's like 8 years ago, the job I was working at back when I was teaching, I was getting up very early in the morning, doing very long days, and it was kind of high pressure, high stress, the school I was teaching at. I was drinking a lot of caffeine, caffeine to wake me up, caffeine during the day, caffeine to make it through the day, and I was getting really bad headaches. And it wasn't caffeine withdrawal, it was kind of a cluster headache that I got from, stress combined with caffeine intake, and it was getting pretty bad. It was a light sensitivity, I think. It was a lingering headache, but if there was bright light, it was a absolutely piercing, blinding, kind of brain melting headache, kind of ramped up to like 12 when there was bright light. So I try and limit my caffeine intake. I probably should be better with that one, but I know that if I've had a lot of caffeine in the day, I then switch to something uncaffeinated for quite a while afterwards, because I don't want to get myself to that level of caffeine addiction where I'm starting to get headaches again, because that's not good. That's really not good. And I should probably cut back on the amount of kind of aspartame I'm drinking anyway, because that's not good for you. But there we go. Anywho, yes, so that is Calvin Core. The other thing, and that's the silly, quick RPG. The more serious one is an idea I put out a little while back. I've never written a duet or solo journaling game before. I mean, you absolutely could play the stuff I've done as kind of duet games. Probably less so as solo journaling. Well, maybe role-playing snowflakes. You probably could do that as a solo game. But I've never attempted one of them, and there's a lot out there, and I'm intrigued by the concept of it. I play tested. I want to get the name of this right. Is it called Family Album? Taylor Navarro's one. Let me get the name of this one right. Yeah, Family Album. So Family Album is a great journaling game created by Taylor Navarro. And I'll chuck that in the chat here because that's well worth playing. And I play tested that. I very much enjoyed it. And I've seen quite a few people playing games of that ilk. And I've just backed... Oh, my brain! My brain is melting today. Without having a million post-its in front of me, which doesn't really help. There's kind of a limit to having information in front of you because you end up not being able to take any of it in. The Almanac of Sanguine Paths, which is a solo or duet game about two werewolves writing letters to each other, which is very cool. It's from Montfort Tales. So that is currently kickstarting. So I will also chuck that one in here. So that is sort of the sequel to an equivalent vampire book that they wrote, which is called Dead Letter Society, which I don't have. But fortunately, with this Kickstarter, you can get both copies. But that looks like a lot of fun as well. I would say if you're getting the Kickstarter for this one, you can get the two soft cover copies relatively inexpensively. I think I got getting both of them for about 36 quid, something like that, which is pretty good for two nice soft cover books. But there are two really pretty special edition versions on there, which are, kind of foil hardcover. They're really nice. And I was tempted. I was so tempted to pick those up. But I just couldn't justify the price for them because I've just had big outlays in terms of upgrading my laptop, which I've done recently, and my streaming setup, and life is expensive as well. So I couldn't justify. If I was going to do a self-treat and a splurge on this one, I probably would have got the special edition. But I decided to be a bit more financially savvy on this one, so didn't go for it at this time. But yeah, so the point before I went off on this tangent is that I've never I've never written a journaling game or a duet game. And I thought, what would be interesting to do kind of like that? I mean, there's a temptation to be very literal with journaling games and be it's like they are writing their story, captain's log, blah, 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 blah. That might be interesting, but it's very, very literal. So I thought, what would be an interesting kind of duet game that you could then modify into a journaling game if you wanted to? And what I've come up with is a game that is currently working under the name of Up or Down. That's kind of literally the theme and also the mechanic of this one. So the notion of this is it's based on that very traditional idea, whether it's based in kind of Christianity or mythology, of a person has died and now there is essentially a conversation, sort of a test, sort of a judgment of whether you are allowed to proceed into the good afterlife or the bad afterlife or something in between. I think it's Anubis in Egyptian mythology has this with the scales and a black ball and your heart as well. I think that your heart is weighed on this one to judge whether you're a good or bad person. So this is the theme around this one. Because I thought that's quite an interesting concept for a duet game. The notion that your character, whomever they may be, is having a conversation with a figure who somehow is an emissary of the afterlife. And again, I'm keeping this very broad in terms of what the mythology is around that, and you could absolutely come up with your own thing for a game of this. And this individual is listening to you tell stories. By default, 4 stories, but you could do more, you could do less. And then based on that, you essentially get kind of good or bad judgments at the end of this. But I'm imagining like kind of marbles, white marbles, black marbles, something like that, or whatever kind of marbles you like. And then essentially there's a tipping point of whether, in the conclusion, you are allowed through into the good place or the bad place. So I thought that's a nice concept for a duet game, but it could also easily be adapted into a solo journaling game, because essentially if you take out the second character being played by a second person and you just role play that through as a written or verbal conversation of how that would go, especially if you think of it's not a Guardian of the Afterlife as such, but if you think about kind of the Ghosts of Christmas Yet to Come being like a very silent judging figure, it doesn't require much in the way of intervention if you want to go down that route. If you want to go for there is a silent figure judging you and you are telling the story or the 4 stories, and then at the end of it, essentially, they either give you the black marble or the white marble. It doesn't require you talking to yourself as such. And I may even stick in a few audio prompts as well. I might pre-record some stuff so that if you want to play it on your own, you have a second voice to bounce stuff off of. Because it doesn't require much. If you want to not role-play both sides of the conversation, you just need a tell me about a time where you X, tell me about a time where you Y, and you have been judged worthy, you've been judged unworthy. So I might do that. Which brings down to mechanics. So I've been thinking about what would be fun to do with this. And what I'd ideally like to do is move away from dice. I do have a sort of a dice option in this one, but one of the other things I wanted to do with the game, inspired by some other systems I've seen and other Kickstarters I've seen, is cards feel like an appealing way of doing a rules-based system. And that's when the two immediately hit together, and it's down with the ups or downs. So essentially what you've got is a play your cards right mechanic-ish. So essentially you would start off with like a 7, and then there will be other cards laid out on the table representing the 4 stories. And you will start your story, and at a tipping point, I've used that phrase before, at a decision point during your story, you will flip the card over and you will find out whether this ends well or badly in this story. Which means the only to kind of tell a story which is a dilemma and you could go either way without the storyteller knowing how it ended before they start the story and set it up. So that at that decision point you go, right, I'm going to reveal it, and you go, this is something that is they are proud of or not proud of. So you've got to play your cards right kind of mechanic. And obviously if you end up telling good things, then the next one will probably be bad because for those who don't know, play your cards right, essentially it's a higher or lower game. So if you've got a 7 and you guess the next one's going to be higher and then it's a 9, you were right. If it was a 3, then it's less than. Yeah, but the point is, if you go from a 7 then go up to like a 10 or a jack, the next thing, I can't speak now. In terms of probability, is more likely to be lower underneath. So there should be a bit of a balance along the way. It's very unlikely you would end up with a good going all the way through this, which means that the eventual decision and the tipping point at the end of it is kind of in flux until the end, which should be nice. It may turn out differently if you haven't shuffled the deck well, or cards just play randomly. But so that you've got this play your cards right mechanic essentially for the good and the bad ending on this one, combined with a set of prompt cards. So essentially you're going to tell by default 4 stories, and they're going to be based around a theme. And then I'm keeping this nice and open in terms of what do you want to use as your prompt cards. I'm kind of imagining tarot is a good way of doing this. So you could have a tarot deck and you turn over a tarot card and it will reveal a broadly speaking theme of what this story is about. And tarot cards are broad enough that actually you're not being pigeonholed into a very, very specific story. There's a lot of things you could talk about prompted by that, but you could use other things as well, which is the nice thing. You could pre-write with someone else, a list of themes. You could steal cards from a different game or a different system. I have, it's not a game. I have, back from when I was a teacher, I have a set of cards called pack type cards, which are designed as a kind of personality system. So you can draw, you've got a deck of cards with various words on it. There is a kid's version, which is like, I like to have fun, I like to play with others, I like to lead, I like to show, I get nervous about things, Then there's adult versions which are specific words, like, trying to think of an example of any word off the top of my head of this one, loquacious or something like that, that you choose these cards for personality. But the fact is, if you use the prompt cards, that would be very interesting. So if you tell a story about turn over a personality type when you were meticulous, that could be an interesting prompt. Or you could steal cards from kind of anything. You could take Monopoly community chest cards if you wanted to. That would tell you about a very, very specific story, but that could be your prompt. So I'm trying to keep this open. So by default, I'm thinking deck of playing cards, jokers removed, unless I come up with something fun that you can do with jokers. Might do that. Note to self, think about what you could do with jokers. And then prompt deck, by default tarot, but you could use something else. But if you wanted to, if you didn't want to use cards, you could use dice if you wanted to. You could roll, 5 dice in a row, and you could do it kind of Perudo Liar's dice style, have it under a cup, so the cups are face down on the table, and only when people think do you know what the roll is going to be. So I want to keep it flexible in terms of what stuff you've got in order to do it. But essentially you just need prompts and you need something that generates random numbers. And I'm probably worth noting on the random number front, whether that's cards or dice or something else. If you're playing it as a duet game, I said we've got the cards face down, or the cups over the dice, so you can't see them. But at the start of the story, the judgment figure, the keeper, whatever they are, the emissary, looks at what it is, probably. So they know whether this story ends well or not before the teller does. So that means that they can drop in things to make it more interesting as they go through, knowing the fact that this is going to be a good story or a bad story. And I think that makes it interesting. And you could say, well, why does the person telling the story not kind of know how it goes at the start? But I think the point is, it's objective judgment, isn't it? You could tell a story about a time in your life. I mean, one, memory is fallible, and if you're telling a story about when you were young, you probably don't remember all the details. But I think the interesting thing about you telling a story about some time in your life where something happened is you don't know necessarily objectively how well it went or not. You might have a feeling about it, and they would have a feeling here from what the last card was. If it's a 10, more likely the next thing is going to be bad rather than good, but you don't know for sure. And that makes it interesting telling the story, because you could think about a time in your life where something happened, but unless you then spoke to every bystander who saw it, you wouldn't necessarily know what the influence on other people's lives were. You know how it felt to you, but you don't know, eventually, in the grand scheme of things, was it good or was it bad? Did it end up helping someone, or did it end up hurting someone? You might have an instinct on it, but you wouldn't know for sure. And that's what the interesting thing about this is. You're telling a story, but only halfway through will you realise how it's going to go. And the last part of this will be, I'm going to let them make a decision about it themselves. So at the start, they should ask, do you think you should go through into the afterlife, into the good afterlife? I'll find a better generic phrase for that. That, in theory, doesn't influence anything, but at the end, once actually all the black and white marbles are ready, and in theory the scales are in a certain position, you can then get asked the question again, and this could influence the final decision. So if you're at a middle ground, if you've got like 2 black balls, 2 white balls, then at this stage, your decision on how you, on reflection, feel about your life or your character's life, then is the tipping point that you go one way or the other. And I think that could be interesting. So I'm quite excited about this. I think, in theory, it's a very simple system. I need to think what happens on a tie. If you had a 7 and you draw another 7, what happens? Is that just nothing? I'm thinking more you get a black ball and a white ball. It's good and bad. And I probably won't use black and white because, you know, there is an influence there, which is, you know, or insinuation there, which is not good. Maybe I'll use kind of, you know, red and white or something like that. Or you can use whatever you like. I mean, the point of this game is, you know, you can use whatever you like to represent goods and bads on there. I think this could be a lot of fun. I think that the rules are simple. Let's play your cards right. Yeah, kind of basically everyone knows it. The rules are simple, but I think it's a good framework for, especially if you did it as a duet, but also solo journaling. I think there is some potential here for telling some really good stories, and that's the heart of a good RPG, isn't it? It's about telling really interesting stories, either on your own or with other people. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So at some point, I'm going to write this up into a playtest version. It won't be pretty. It'll just be 1 or 2 pages, you know, simple fonts, black text on white background, and I will put this around as a playtest document for people to have some fun with, because I would like to get some feedback from other people on, you know, what needs clarifying, what could be phrased better, and then I can start sticking in the kind of stuff. You know, I can stick in extra lore, or not lore as such, but kind of flavor text on it, and make it look all pretty in terms of the presentation. Because obviously, if you're dealing with, you know, heaven or hell, good afterlife, bad afterlife, good place, bad place, there's some potential, some really fun kind of gothic-y art on this one. So I think that's going to be quite a bit of fun. And I'm looking forward to doing it. You know, I think, yeah, I think that's going to be very enjoyable, and I'll do that soon. I might write it on stream. I was weighing this up on. I had some time on Friday evening. Toddler was asleep, and going fast asleep. My wife was out, so I was tempted to do some writing. I was tempted to do a stream for it, and I just kind of wasn't feeling it. In theory, the stars were aligned that it was a good time to do a stream, but I just wasn't feeling it. And I think if you get, especially if you're going to do a writing stream, you've got to have the energy and enthusiasm to not only write and write productively, whether that's good or bad, but write productively. But you've got to be excited about it enough that you're happy to narrate what you're doing and get feedback on it. And I was just tired. I was really tired on Friday evening, and I thought I could do this, but I think it might be a bit of a wasted opportunity doing it. So I may stream it, I may not. I'm kind of leaning towards not right now, given the fact that I fleshed out so much of how I want this to work. It's more just going to be a, seriously Dave, just put, you know, fingers to keyboard and write the damn thing. Might not be that entertaining to watch, but I might do it. We'll see. Again, I'm away with work, and that's good writing time, but it's not necessarily good streaming time, because I'll take my laptop with me, but obviously I won't have multiple screens. I will be in a hotel somewhere with, you know, potentially dodgy Wi-Fi. It probably won't provide a good stream experience, so we'll see. We'll see whether I do it that way or just write it and get on with it. So how are we getting on? We are not too bad. It is 5 past, so I've got, in theory, up to 10 minutes left. I might call this one sooner rather than later, to be honest, because I've got quite a busy afternoon of stuff I need to get on with. So I probably want a couple of minutes to, you know, transition back into a work headspace rather than jumping straight into that one straight away. But in terms of other bits and pieces, while I don't want to just, you know, immediately take 10 minutes from you, rather, other bits and pieces. So BG3 is carrying on, still very much enjoying it. There've been, I'm in Act 2. Again, I don't want to spoil it. There are some bits where it was less obvious what I had to do in places. I don't want to cheat on it, I don't want to metagame it, but there were definitely some bits of, it doesn't really feel to be a way to do this, you know. And it was the, can you kill these things and get this and be an okay ending on this one? And I don't want to search for stuff, but I did have to do a little bit of I have done this the right way, right? And I mean, don't even mean right way in terms of the right conclusion. It's literally just I don't know what to do here. You know, I just need a bit of reassurance that me floundering around is at least productive, whether it ends up with a good result or a bad result. So there've been a couple of those in there. I'm really enjoying the character stuff. I still have my party of Borton, so my protagonist, and I have Karlach and Lae'zel, and Shadowheart. I'm very much like the fact. Spoilers. I'll be vague. I'm very like the fact that I've encountered a character from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. So that is really cool. I like how they've been represented. I understand that they might actually be able to join me as a companion later on, which is very cool. But it's nice. I understand there are links in this game to Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. And I'm glad to see that there is some continuity of thread with that. And when you talk to them, they mention, like, aren't you famous for something? And they say, yeah, I did this, and this. And it's like, hey, that's the plot of Baldur's Gate 1. So I am very glad that they are having some definite links to Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Other than the fact that, as far as I understand it, we're going to go to the city of Baldur's Gate. I think that would be a shame if this were called Baldur's Gate 3 and the only link at all was the fact that some of the plot is set in the city. You know, they did that with the spin-off ones. I forget what they were called. They did some ones for the console, which were just a bit more hack and slash. Was it not Dark Omens, Dark Shadows? Maybe it was Dark Omens. What was it called? They made some sort of game, and it was called Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. And those were set in the city of Baldur's Gate. But they were more hack and slash. But as far as I could tell, they had nothing to link the plots. It was just we're going to trade on the Baldur's Gate brand here. And people who played the other Baldur's Gate game may buy this. And I was really hoping they wouldn't do that with Baldur's Gate 3. Because if you're going to make Baldur's Gate 3, it really should be the third Baldur's Gate. Not just, here's a game set in that city. Because you're advertising it very, very differently. You know, what you're selling something very different to the people playing it. So, so I'm really enjoying the fact that there's links in there to those original games. So that is very, very fun. And I'm curious to see where it goes. Again, I'm getting more of an idea on terms of the big bad and the like. But it's still not entirely clear, which is fun. I like that. That's kind of one thing of going back to Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. You knew who the villain was from literally the prologue. Well, Baldur's Gate 2, literally the first word spoken. John Irenicus, going, the child of Baal has awoken. In Baldur's Gate 1, kind of at the end of the prologue with Sarevok killing Gorion, you know that Sarevok's going to be the villain. Here, it is not as clear, which is fun. I think it does add an element of freedom to this one. And it kind of removes the appearance of railroading. Of course they're railroading you. Of course they are. They can't do a complete, open thing with this. But it's nice that it's got the appearance of, look, you're trying to solve your problem, the tadpoles. But it's not quite as obvious as, in order to do this, you are going to kill this person. And this is how it is going to work. So that's fun. I like that. And it's a cracking game. It really is. I'm already looking forward to a second playthrough of a different sort of character. And also just how they've implemented the mechanics of fun. I'm looking forward to just playing a different class. And, even if I made, broadly speaking, the same decisions in terms of the narrative, which I wouldn't, but I could. And I'd still have a different experience just in terms of playing a different class and how they've implemented them, because there is a wonderful richness there, being able to use some of these abilities that I've only read about in the player's handbook, because I've been a more DM than a player with 5th edition. So being able to actually go, oh great, I get to play this, but I get to use these abilities that I've read about, that's very, very fun. So cool. So that's going really, really well. I've got a couple of minutes left, so let's just do plugs and stuff like that. So personal plug for me, I've still got hosting. So I host the Tabletop RPG Creators Directory on my website. It's a place for all kinds of creators, whether you're writers, whether you're streamers, whether you're artists, sensitivity readers, editors, producers, to collaborate and reach out to each other and know what various people's skill sets and specialities are. I run that. I kind of cover all the costs myself because there is a subscription fee to the model I'm using here. If people want to contribute to that, you absolutely can, even if it's just a couple of quid. That is great. That would make a difference rather than me paying for it all myself. So that's there. If you want to do it, just follow kind of the Ko-fi link on that one. I just want to kind of cover the costs up until the end of the year. And then I'll do it again next year. I want to keep it going. In terms of other stuff to plug, please, if you haven't done so already, please check out Tess Fowler. We talked about Tess last week. She and her husband Chris are in a really rough situation. She is a fantastic artist who has been through some really rough life stuff over the last couple of years in her battle with cancer, and now she's been chucked out of our house because of financial shit. With people reneging on schemes that were going to cover rent while she was dealing with cancer. So that sucks. That sucks a lot. So please check out Tess on Instagram. I believe she's on Blue Sky. She doesn't use Twitter anymore. But Instagram's the main point, of course, she's using. And someone set up a crowdfunder. It's not called crowdfunder. What's it called? Donating to someone for the scheme. I can't even think what it's called on this one. But you can donate directly to her through our PayPal, or someone has set up a website so you can donate towards getting stuff sorted, because they've had to leave their house, they've had to pack up all their stuff, it's in storage. I think they're currently in a hotel, and you know, it would be really great if this community could help support the pair of them, because it's a horrible situation. It was a horrible situation beforehand, and now it's got even worse. You know, just when there was a small light at the end of the tunnel here, they've been hit with having their been kicked out of that, which is not cool. That's not cool at all. So anything you can do to help support Tess and Chris, please have a look. That would be wonderful. Okie doke. Right, I think that's me. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday. I won't be doing these for the next couple of days because, like I said, I've got to go away with work. But I will try. I might be able to Friday. We'll see. But I do want to try and get something more fixed in terms of what days I'm doing this. Come down doing Monday as a fixed thing, and I'll try and do extras if I can. And I do want to do more writing streams and stuff. I may even do a gaming stream. But it's about getting into a routine, and I don't want to overcommit early on because that's terrible. Anywho, have a lovely Monday and take care of yourselves. Ta-ta for now.